Hello and welcome to BookBeat. I'm your host, Sue Ellen Zagrabelny. Today we have as our guests Don Frederick, Jenny Goliboy, and Eric Hain, agents with Red Sofa Literary. We'll start with Don for a little introduction and about the history of Red Sofa Literary.
Definitely. So actually in 2000, I moved to the Twin Cities. I just got my master's degree in library and information sciences, had done my internships. I had worked at a publishing house, which is why I came here. And I really missed the bookstore. I missed developing new ideas. I missed discussing new things. And the publishing house internally, while it was great, I just really missed the raw ideas that you get from a finished book. So I was talking to a friend. I wanted to become an agent, and he introduced me to my friend Lori Harper, who started Sebastian Literary Agency in California. And she had just moved here around the same time, and she brought me under her wing, and she trained me, and eventually I leapt off her shoulders, and I started at Red Sofa Literary at the end of 2008. And then it just kind of slowly grew from there.
Cool. Jenny, let's start with you next.
Sure.
What brought you into Red Sofa Literary? How did you get here?
So I was a writer first, and summer of 2011, I was thinking, I really want to know about how publishing really works from the inside. And I saw an internship pop up at Springboard for the Arts. I love those guys. And I thought, why don't I try out? And I was Dawn's intern for the summer. At the end of the summer, I found a fantastic book, and I said, Dawn, you have to represent this. This book is so good. We'll sell it like that. She said, I'm sorry, my schedule is totally full. I can't do it. You do it. And that's how I became an agent. And I've just been having the best time doing this. So, yeah.
Fabulous. That's so cool. And Eric, what brought you into this group of...
Yeah, I graduated college about 4 years ago, and right out of school, I knew that I wanted to do publishing. And I wanted to be in the writing and book world. So I did what a lot of people do, which is pack your stuff up and move to New York. And I did that. I got an internship at Oxford University Press to start, and I worked there for about 2 years as an editorial assistant and then an assistant editor. And then switched to the Overlook Press, which is a small independent house down in Soho. And they were great because they worked on all kinds of different books. So I got a chance to work on some novels, to work on some histories, of various kinds of nonfiction. And eventually I kind of became both sick of working in a publisher and kind of being in New York. So I came out here and met up with Dawn, and it's kind of the best of all worlds because I get to work in the the book deal business still, and I'm in the Twin Cities. So.
Well, are you from the Twin Cities originally?
My family is.
Family.
I'm not. I'm originally from Denver, but I have a lot of family out here. My parents both know the area really well, so it kind of made a good fit as just kind of a history of the Hain family.
Very good. So that's how you all got together.
Yep. And we do have other agents. We have Laura Zatz, Bree Ogden, Stacey Graham, and Amanda Rutter. Amanda's in London, or no, Nottingham, England. Stacey's on the East Coast, Bree is closer to the West Coast, and then Laura's based here in the Twin Cities.
So you aren't geographically consolidated in one place.
We're all over the place.
You're all over the place, and you work electronically as well as collegially, like we are doing around the table.
Right.
So that leads to the next question. You've talked about how the group has come together. Talk about the scope of your business. What is it like on a given day at Red Sofa Literary?
I don't think there's any day that's the same. Our lives, I feel like you really cannot become an agent, let alone work in publishing, unless you know how to multitask to a very crazy ability. Everyone thinks we get to read for fun all the time. That is not the case. It's a balancing act. Like, how do you feel? You've just come into it, and it's
Well, so yeah, it's just a ton of reading. It's a amount of reading where if you sat and did it, you could do it for months, just straight, without doing anything else. And that's really cool on one hand, because there's always something you can be reading and evaluating. But it does mean you have to manage your time well. It does mean you have to make decisions about what you like and don't like faster in order to be able to rule things out and move on to the next thing. If you do like something, you've got to be able to read it efficiently so you can actually, start working on it. But yeah, no. So for me, my main time management has always been, well, how much time can I spend reading today? Because if I wanted to, I could do nothing but read, and of course that doesn't work because there's a lot more to the job than just that.
All right. What about you, Jenny?
Oh, it really varies day by day. First,
Yeah.
the most important thing is, what do my current clients need? I'm sending it out to editors soon.
Okay.
And then there's always someone who's got a book going to be published soon, so we have to make sure that publicity for that person is ticking along. And then there's always the new clients. I'm always looking to see if there's anything interesting in my inbox. So balancing all of that is important too. We also like to teach people when we get the chance too. We just came back.
Writer's Digest.
Yeah, Writer's Digest, I think, was one that was really recent. People came in and gave us pitches about the books they're working on right now, and we helped them think about their books more clearly. It was really fun.
Oh, good. Go ahead, Dawn.
Oh, no, she did great with that. That's great.
Okay. Okay. Does it make sense to ask what kind of business model do you follow?
Well, every agency is a little bit different. So an agent friend of mine that's based in Chicago, she emailed me to ask how we do our jobs at our agency. And I find that I really appreciate the degree of independence each of us has. We do have various tasks that we're in charge of, and we try to take care of those things, but I don't approve what Eric or Jenny or anyone else decides to work on. Those are their authors, and that's fine with me. They do what they want to do at their own pace, and I do the same. And then generally, I get super involved when we're dealing with contracts or anything beyond the book, because once we sell the book, there's other stuff we have to do. So I will get heavily involved with that. But that's constantly. I don't feel the need to hover, and I try not to. So
We like to ask for advice.
Yeah.
Because you're the one with the most experience, is that true?
Yeah. In the
just-
group, yeah.
In the group, okay.
I would say I'm kind of an old agent. I was always laugh like I don't feel old, but when I started, we weren't using email to pitch ideas. I had to pitch everything by phone, and I had to mail manuscripts to the publishers. And the new generation of agents don't even know what that's like. I remember
how
taking
fun.
60 packages to the office every month. It's
I couldn't fathom making that many phone calls. That sounds terrible. That's completely foreign to me.
it was hard.
There's one editor I had to call, and she realized that her phone had never been hooked up, and she never noticed because she does everything
Oh,
by
I didn't
email.
use my phone when I was an editor.
Well,
I just
yeah.
didn't answer it.
Yeah.
Because all my work was over email. It was one of those things
Exactly.
where I just didn't need to.
Yeah, so in the old days, I would choose 10 editors to pitch book ideas to, for like 10 editors per book, and I have to call them on the phone and talk to them. And now we do it all by email. So if I actually do call an editor and they do answer the phone, I feel it's something that's going to move quickly. I'm not going to do email. I'm
Yeah.
trying to get to the front of the line at that point.
Okay. Talk some more about the new generation of agents.
It's different. So we saw one of my friends, John, another agent in New York, and I hung out with his group of people when I first started, and like I said, everything was done by phone, but he's not really on social media as much as like other agents. The new young agents are all on. I mean, they're just all into the social media stuff. It's really interesting to see the balance of social media versus like things you're doing in real life. It's I don't know, the perspective is fascinating to me, because I generally do a lot of social media too, but I do back off when it's time to back off.
So when an author queries you is that true that still happens, that authors send queries, but do they send them electronically or do they?
Yes.
Okay, so
If
no,
we get a paper query, it feels strange. Like, oh my God.
No, no,
What
no,
is
no,
this?
no,
I
no,
put it
yeah.
in the special pile to deal with later, and then I forget, which is horrible. But
Yeah.
the email ones, it's great. You just start on the bottom and you slowly work your way up, and everybody gets dealt with.
And Laura's not here to tell the great story. Sometimes like, you'll get profiled as an agent in a website or some publication, and so she got profiled on Writer's Digest one time, but no one told her. So her inbox went from like 100 emails to 1,200 emails by the end of the day.
Oh my
and by
gosh.
the end of the year, she had over 10,000 queries, and she was still answering those queries like well into the next year.
Oh
And
my
we had an
goodness.
intern just help her answer the queries, because that, I mean, and the reality is that Eric and Jenny have their authors, and I have mine too, but I only maybe sign 5 or 6 people a year. So you
Yeah,
look at the
that sounds-
thousands of queries, it's very low odds of getting selected.
So that tends to identify that the constituency of authors is going to be a very small number.
Yeah, I mean we laugh at the bad queries and we share them internally, and we might like share snippets of them through our social media, but not really give it all away. But I mean the inbox sometimes is the biggest barrier. It's just like we were talking before we came on here. I mean, just ignoring my email for 4 days, almost 900 emails. You can only
Yeah.
do so much.
Right. Mine's not so bad because my focus is a lot tighter than everybody else's at the agency, so I never get that huge a number. But I'll tell you, it really does make a difference if you research the agent you're submitting to as a writer, and you say, okay, what does this agent really do? I get things all the time that, oh gosh, celebrity memoir. That is something I would never represent and have never represented, but people send it to me, and your odds go to like this if you send an agent who doesn't represent your kind of thing,
Oh,
Yeah.
that makes all kinds of sense, but I've never heard it said to that, that bluntly, and that's important.
It is.
Because I have interviewed authors and prospective authors, and they've talked about how they've gotten an agent, and a lot of them started out with paper queries and
Yeah.
the phone calls and all of that kind of thing. But it sounds like you can do your job more efficiently with the paperless.
It's a lot easier. I mean, if there's too many emails, but I'm hungry for a certain category, you can search your email and say, I'm looking for young adult. What's in here? What's in the inbox right now? And skip over the stuff that you don't really want to look at right now.
And what about you, Eric? What areas or what genres do you seek out?
Yeah, so I'm looking for a lot of adult fiction. I really like literary fiction written for not specifically a younger audience. I like, there's a lot of genres now. There's young adult, there's middle grade, there's these categories that really specialize for a certain age of person, and I'm not really interested as an agent in that kind of work. I'm more into kind of the basic, just literary fiction for an adult. On a general shelf, you'd find it, in the new fiction section of Barnes and Noble. And then on the nonfiction side, I'm hoping to do, I'm fairly new, so I'm still kind of building out my list of clients and everything. But I'm hoping to do a lot of history and a lot of trade science. I really love pop science. When you get someone who's really smart working with something really complex in a lab or something, and they're able to talk about it in a way that even I would understand and write about it engagingly, I think that's really cool, and I think that it's important, and I think they make great books.
Oh, that sounds interesting. The trades, what did you call
By
it?
trade, I mean general interest. I mean able to be accessed by a
Any
reader who
reader.
isn't an expert, who doesn't have the PhD that the author has. And
Okay.
something kind of the style of writing you'd find in the Atlantic or Scientific American or the New Yorker, places like that, where it's written by people with a certain amount of expertise, and they're writing for an audience that is intellectually engaged but not subject matter experts.
Okay. We've talked about the queries. Are there any other ways that you secure clients?
Well, I mean, sometimes you get interesting things. Like I'm always shocked that somehow Paul Douglas called me last year, the meteorologist.
Oh, really?
And I thought it was a joke. I honestly did think it was a joke. And he's the most gracious person, but he just needed an agent. So he called me and we started that conversation. And so he's an amazing client. He has a book coming out this fall. And he's just someone that brought a lot of professionalism to the stage, but he was referred to me through someone else. I'm not sure who, but he basically reached out to me through a basic referral and just talking to other people in town. We go to conferences, which you could talk a little bit more about.
Well, there are a couple of kinds of conferences we like going to. One is one specifically for writers. Often they have pitch sessions where people can sign up for special times to pitch an agent. So they'll have like a 10-minute window and they'll be able to explain their book to us. And I guess I can give more detailed advice about that, but the one thing I would say is the more like a conversation it is, the more I'll be engaged with the whole thing.
Yeah.
Let's see, the other kind of conferences, I am a sci-fi agent, so I go to a lot of science fiction conventions. I go to Convergence here in town. I try to go to Worldcon every year, which is in Kansas City this year, so that'll be fun. And you can just come up and talk to me and tell me about your book. I love that kind of thing.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is new in terms of finding clients, and something I'm hoping to do a lot more, and it kind of ties back into what we were saying about social media, is I spend a fair amount of time, like a lot of people my age, on Twitter. And for me, that's kind of a collection of people talking about things and writers sharing pieces they're writing about on whatever topic. And it's become a really interesting place to find people working on cool things. So I'll scroll through my social media feeds and you'll see an article, written about something, whatever it is. You can click on it and say, oh, well, is there a book on that? And or has this author written something that's kind of in book form? And it's become a really great tool to spur not only ideas but find people to write the ideas. And it's all kind of right there because we've got this tool now that can kind of collate everything you're interested in into one area. And it's made the research aspect, going out, not just waiting for a query to hit your inbox, but going out and actually finding the writer you want to do a project you've been thinking about before it even, because I guess when I think about the biggest difference between being an agent and being an editor, which I was for a few years, there's so much more exploration that happens as an agent. You can take the time and actually go find writers who haven't worked on a book yet, as opposed to having to kind of keep a commercial list running in a publishing house as an editor. So I'm finding myself with a lot more time to go on hunts, go on explorations through whatever subject matter I find interesting that day, and just seeing who is writing on it, what kind of books have been written about it before. Maybe there's a market for something new on whatever topic it is. And I think it's a really interesting new way that agents are finding clients.
Well, there was actually someone who wrote a story about Bolivian female wrestlers for the BBC, and these women are, oh my God, they're amazingly dressed in their garb. They got their makeup on, their hair is perfect, and then they're in the middle of the ring, like fighting, like flying through the air like a WWF kind of thing. It was fascinating.
Wow.
It was some BBC reporter, so I hunted down who I thought was the correct person, and apparently there are two journalists with the same name.
Oh my goodness.
So I found the one that wasn't her in Australia, and I reached out to her, and she's like, yeah, everyone thinks I'm her, but it's not me. So then I hunted her down through the BBC website, couldn't find her, and then I pulled a favor with someone to get her actual email address.
Oh, how fun.
So then I reached out to her, and she's like, I already have an agent. I'm like, I do a book on the Bolivian female wrestlers. But that's the kind of stuff, it's the thrill of the hunt. You almost feel like a sleuth because you're trying to find these people.
It's finding people who've written shorter form stuff, because odds are if it's a book you've read that's really interesting, that writer probably already has an agent. There's not much room to work there. It's when you find someone who's written in a shorter format, and you can just tell that someone would want to read about it in 90,000 words as opposed to 3,000. That's when your gears kind of get turning about, oh, hey, maybe we can get this person to write something longer.
Oh, right. That makes a lot of sense. What kind of services do you offer to clients once they sign in with you?
Well, we don't get paid unless we sell a book. So if you're operating by the code of the Association of Author Representatives, you do not get paid unless you sell the book. So we get 15% of what's sold. So if we actually do offer to represent someone, this really is a work of love. It could take a few weeks. It could take 3 years. You never know how long it's going to take to sell a book. So you basically commit yourself to the author, into the idea, and you really put a lot of time and energy into that. A lot of us joke we don't want to know what we make hourly because it's not worth it. We work all the time. But at that point, as agents, we have a lot of responsibilities. One is the contract. When we sell the book, we have to have a fair contract on behalf of our authors. So when Eric was an editor, he got to dance the jig with the agents because we all know what we're doing. We know we're all looking out for ourselves, basically. And then we have to deal with other things like coaching our authors. Sometimes they don't have a website or they're not on social media. Then we're having to help them through that process. We're going through editing maybe internally with their book or they're getting their book proposal ready. Sometimes we have to do problem solving once the book is sold and they don't accept the edits. We've all been through this. There's a whole level by which we intercede on behalf of the publishing house to make sure that situation gets resolved too. It's a constant juggling act, advocating as good as you can.
I was going to say, you just kind of become the general, helper, throughout the whole publication process, and it's a process that, there's always some sort of unforeseen thing that happens. And if you're an author, the first thing you're going to do is want someone who is explicitly on your side, trying to help you, trying to explain what's going on to you because they understand the industry better. Most writers don't understand the publishing industry at first, and why should they? So it's great to have that kind of partnership where when something happens in a house and they say, well, what's going on? And you can say, well, this is what it is. This is how we can turn this in a manner that is good for everyone. Okay. Here's how we can do this to the betterment of your career, to the book, to whatever the situation is.
It's always, you're constantly having to assess what to do, and I find even on days like last week with all of us recovering from BEA, and that's Book Expo of America, I knew not to make any big decisions because I feel like we're constantly having to spin around and make new decisions. We are always making decisions, so it's a lot of little things we have to do that add up to what we do for our authors. But ultimately, we have a hashtag on Twitter called Team Red Sofa, and that is our hashtag we created. And that basically just reminds our authors that the publishing house, us, and the author are all in this together. We were brought together by books. We're going to work as a team. No one is anyone's boss. So,
right. You mentioned a code of conduct. What is the organization?
Well, it's the Association of Author Representatives, which was formed a long time ago. But basically, agents, legit agents, you do not pay them up front to sell your book to the publisher. That's a red flag. You need to run away. We only take books on and we get paid when they're sold. So that is, some people would like that to change, but that is, we operate by that code.
Well, that makes sense. And it would seem to me that it would make sense for the authors to not seek out somebody that's going to say, oh, you've got to pay.
Right. What is it? Is it Yogg's Law? Money flows towards the author? Yeah. That's what they say in sci-fi world.
You mentioned the certain genre that each of you represent. Is there any other categories that your agency represents? You said you do sci-fi mainly.
I do mostly adult science fiction and fantasy, though I do love history. So I have a really cool author who writes about shipwrecks in the 19th century. She's got a book coming out in November, Jill Hoffs, Jill with a G. But in general, yes, I very much about the sci-fi. In general, the agency is. We were trying to think, what is our mission statement? We talk about things like we want to represent geek culture broadly. We want to have things that we want to make things appear on the shelves that wouldn't appear there otherwise. We want to. We don't want stuff that just fits in with the mold of everything else. We want the quirky and the unusual and the interesting, and we want to help it find its home.
And we're always looking for diversity, and that is kind of like the big popular term, but we've been wanting that a long time. So anything that really explores the world beyond what we consider the normal, we want diversity to just flow into all the books we do without it being intentionally diverse. We want it to naturally be diverse. I mean, that's for what I call big kid books, which is not children's books, and then children's books, we want it in both areas.
One of the questions that I have, if I were approaching finding an agent as an author, when is a good time to do that?
These two are writers, by the way. They haven't
So-
admitted they're both agents and writers. So,
Okay,
yeah,
so-
yeah.
For me, I think it's a good time to start thinking about getting an agent when you have something that you need represented. I think a lot of the time people start thinking about the agent, oh, I need to get an agent to get published, before they even have something that's really ready to be published or that they really feel good about wanting to be published. So I guess, thinking about it, it's, there's always time, and it's never too late to find representation and publish. So take your time, finish your book. You don't have to go around and worry about the mechanical side of the industry before you've actually produced the content you're looking to introduce. So I guess when I turn down authors right away, it's because it feels like they don't have something that's ready yet. It's like, why are you talking to me now? You're not done yet, or you haven't done your due diligence yet on this particular issue, or you haven't researched, what kind of agent you want, who it is, and it doesn't need to be as early and as panicked of a step, I think, is how I view it. What do you?
Well, with nonfiction, the project has to be conceptualized fully, but not written fully.
Yeah, right.
Novels have to be truly, truly done. And one of the things that's hard is I usually won't give things that are not finished a second chance. Most of the authors I work with, I'll ask them for a revision, but it's usually the sort of revision I'm pretty sure that they can do. It will not require restructuring the book. Right. It will not require changing a character in depth. It will generally be something like, the ending is rushed. You need to make this longer. Or this character isn't coming out as distinctively as he needs to be. We need some more moments with this guy. Stuff that doesn't say, okay, and now you need to take this novel apart, put it back together, and then resubmit, because that's a big ask. And if I don't like it after they've done that amount of work,
Yeah, I feel bad.
I feel awful when that happens. So but I do usually ask for some kind of revision, partly because I want to make sure that the person can work with higher level
That's
editorial
huge.
notes
Yeah, that's
without panicking or feeling betrayed. So yeah.
And as the person who's not a writer, generally, I would tell people, if you're doing nonfiction, it needs to be something, you need to have your research done, you need to actually have some semblance of a platform. An author platform is where you have some identity, that you have readers, basically, you have an audience out there in the world that you don't know necessarily. It goes well beyond the reach of your friends, your family, or your little tiny circle that you're in. So for nonfiction, sometimes I'm constantly looking for people who have a fresh idea, but also who are good writers, and it's a timely topic. And
Well, I ask why you?
Why?
Every time. When you get a
Constantly.
nonfiction proposal for something, the first question, and it's always a little bit harsh, but it's a good critical question, is why are you the person that should be writing this book? Why are you the expert? Why are you someone that people would want to hear from on this topic? And that answer is really open-ended. You don't have to be a 20-year expert of whatever it is, but just something about what you've gone out and done in the world that suggests that you know what you're talking about. And it's So I think when the people who have the best luck finding agents are the ones who have kind of thought about that first, who have gone out and really cultivated their own personal platform in their writing, and then actually have something that they need and want represented, you know?
And even like with novels, we have a book coming out with Grey Wolf in 2017 that I remember reading. We read draft 5. It was Patrick's, but we
I
saw
think I
draft.
saw it in 2011.
Yeah, it was like draft 5, and then Patrick, he had a mentorship at the Loft, and he worked on his book, and he just chipped away, and he had the person who took care of him at the Loft was Marlon James of all people. So like it was really exciting.
That's really cool.
I remember going to his reading, and I could tell something magical had happened with this book. I knew he was a good writer, but I could tell something he had gotten over
Right.
the hump, that his writing was ready, and he let me and Laura read draft number 11, and then we did another revision. We went through another edit, and we sold draft 12, and was draft 13 was the final version that's going to publication. So 13 drafts over, it was it 5 or 6 years? It was a long time for this book. So his book was ready, but it took a long time to get there.
So authors need to be willing to be in this for the long haul.
Right.
Oh,
as
yes.
well as you as literary agents.
If you, as an author, can still make it better, go make it better before you send it to someone.
Yes.
Well put.
Amen.
Because I mean, it's going to get edited. You're going to get edited by your agent. You're going to get edited by whoever ends up purchasing the book at the publisher.
Yes.
But if you are staring at your manuscript or your project and think, you know what, this could be, you know, some of this could be tightened, some of this could be rewritten, some of this could be better, it probably just needs to be you that goes and does that before you send it to somewhere. So that when they look at it and they have revisions, they're not ones you could have made yourself.
And doesn't that require often a little time distance
Yeah.
from the material as
Yeah.
well?
And that's, yeah, exactly. And that's why I think the key is not to rush. There's no need to rush.
One of the things that always worries me in a query letter is when someone says, I have just
Just
finished
finished
a
it, yes.
manuscript.
Actually say no to those people immediately. I'll
Really?
say it's time to join a writer's group. If you just finished your book, congratulations. It's time to go.
Right.
Come back to it later. Put it aside and come back to it later.
Telling somebody to, set it aside for a time. Do you ever get queries from somebody who's written a synopsis in 10 chapters or something like that? What do you tell a person that's done that?
Well, if it's nonfiction, they did
Yeah.
it right. If it's fiction,
You probably
It's
want them to
not there
finish the
yet.
book.
Yeah.
It's like
Okay.
if you think about it in terms of like, a mystery novel, it's like, great if you have, first, 75% of the book, but, the whole book is the last, the twist at the end, right? Like, so if you haven't written the twist at the end, how do I know if it's any good? So you got to really, a novel is either a complete thing or it's not done, and
just throwing it out there, when do you guys stop? Because when I'm reading a novel, if I get to page 25 and I'm not
Oh, I stop
liking it,
before that.
I'm done. Like I don't
Right.
even go beyond that page. I'm like, okay, we're done.
Right.
We're like, this is a no at this point.
I'm getting grouchier the longer I do this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Don't waste my time. Yeah. But
It's around 25, or do you go further? Because I don't even make it to 50 if it's not that.
I don't
I
go further.
request the first 3
Yeah.
chapters. The hard ones are the ones where I can say, okay, the easy ones are the ones where I've read chapter 1, I'm midway through chapter 2, and it's like rolling myself uphill to keep going. The hard ones are the ones where I get to chapter 3 and I think I really think this person can write.
Right.
But I'm not fully engaged with the project. And does that mean that this is one of those people who is going to need to edit out the first 3 chapters and there's great stuff ahead? Or is this one of these things where it's never getting better than this? And so those are the ones that usually sit in my inbox for a while, and I go back and see, okay, was I extra grouchy that day? Did I need more coffee?
So, question then, how many
Yeah.
of those do you end up actually acquiring? Because for me, I do that, and it always ends up, well, you should just reject that because you don't love it and you don't want it.
What usually happens in that case is I end up rejecting it with really full
Like, yeah,
notes
okay.
and say, please send me your next project. I
Yeah.
can tell you're quite talented,
Yeah.
but this project didn't quite engage me.
Well, we had an experience with, I read a lit fic, the one that
Yeah.
we talked about,
Yeah.
and it had a great opening. The opening was just was a hard opening. It's very haunting. And I loved the book, but I felt like something was going wrong by page halfway through. But I
Oh.
kept going because I've made it to page 100. I was committed to the book, but I got to the end and I was like, like I still like this book, but it's not ready. I had Eric look at it, and you wrote back and you said, I see what happened.
Yeah.
Because we both
Yeah.
agreed we kind of faltered around the same
60% mark.
yeah, and it was just a moment by which this idea was carrying, but something kind of fell a little bit.
Off kilter a little bit.
But I
sounds
still
like.
couldn't shake it, so I didn't say no immediately because I took Eric's notes, I had my notes, and I just waited a little while, and I sent him a very, very long email. He did not respond for 3 months because I think it was just a lot to digest. You know?
Right.
And he's now going through revision, and that's one of those moments where because I was committed to 60% of the book, he's going to give a new copy of it. Hopefully next year, we'll see. I asked for a year. I said take a whole year to make it amazing, because you have something here, but it's not there yet.
It's rough.
Every time I do that, they don't listen to me. They send it back in 3 months, and it's not ready yet.
It's not ready.
And it kills me because I can say, it's like, you need time. I know you don't want time. You want to be done now, but you're not. And
Yeah.
I've had the occasion to talk to authors that have been, gotten their digest of rejections of
Yeah.
for various reasons, but almost to a person, it's been because the book's not done. And that
Oh.
they've had to either do a lot of cutting, which is, the book was just too long and too many strands, or it is, as you say, there's something that's fundamentally not
Right.
quite squaring.
Right. And it's hard, right? And sometimes it's also, you can have a plot turn that gradually makes everything get worse and worse and worse. You can have, but
It
you
could
can
be too
also,
long. It just could be too long. Period.
you can have an opportunity to take it bigger, where things will have a resonance that you'd like it to be more about. You could have a big meaning here. You can have an emotional moment, and they miss it. And that's another way that things are not ready. I would say the way that most things that I actually request go wrong is, and I'm only reading the first 3 chapters usually here, I didn't connect with the character. And that's kind of a hard trick to learn. How do you make
Well,
the
either it's
average
like too
reader-
cliche or too predictable.
Yeah.
Because, for example, Jenny cringes when there are magic necklaces.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all have very
got a
specific
list.
things. There are certain things you'll be like, oh God, there's a werewolf.
So
No.
Yeah.
My list
Yeah.
of things like that is the thing that gets me to put stuff down that I've read the first few chapters of is less about characters and like the things in the book. It's more about the writing.
Yeah.
And it's about the just some of the hitches that happen in prose that I just find irritating and kind of just get in the way of telling the story. If you've written in every paragraph, your characters are glancing around and grinning, doing all these things that people put in as dialogue tags. That's just
Right.
kind of, it's clunky. If you're spending a lot of time talking about, if you spend a whole paragraph describing something and there's not really any purpose to it, I get kind of irritated at that.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm trying to be like persnickety, but it's just kind of an indicator of well, this hasn't gone through the scrutiny it necessarily needs to yet. It's not that this is a book that doesn't have a ton of promise, but it's just not. It's if you're picking at it right away like that, it's like, oh, well, it's not quite done
I
yet.
wonder if that's like because you're doing stuff that's a lot less pulpy
Yeah,
than
no,
what
that's
I'm looking
probably
at,
true.
and so there's less. I guess the sci-fi equivalent of that is the world building
Yeah,
that
I imagine, yeah.
where you start with the wise monk
Yeah.
going through the village and looking at all the different stalls, and you're like, I am so done with this.
And that's the thing is when you start using when you start doing something other than progressing the story, right? It's like because you want the
Well,
world
I
to be
mean,
built. Yeah.
You wouldn't know by page 25 why the heck you opened this book.
Right.
So if
Exactly.
you're like, why am I
Right.
reading this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because in my brain I'll be, okay, I don't care anymore. I have no idea why, what is going on. I've read the synopsis, but this is not here. I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
So you have to convince me as a reader. And you think about our time, we don't have a lot of free time. So we're speed reading. So think about the reader who has children, they're working, they have a lot of responsibilities. They're not going to stay with this book past page 25 and it comes out.
And the way I often think about it is books are expensive.
Yeah.
You know, like something I ask a lot when I finish something that I like, it's like, would I want to pay $27 for this? You know, would I go to the bookstore and want to actually spend the money and buy this? You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
is what's in this book worth that money? Like, was this a $27 experience? You
Yes.
know, because it's a lot. It's a lot for a
And then
book when you
you
can pay $8 for Netflix a month. You
Yeah.
know, like
Or
there's a lot cheaper ways to entertain yourself.
And you also, if you know that you wouldn't read if it was given to you free of charge.
Right.
At that
Mhm.
point,
Yeah.
you know, at that point, even if it was free, I would not read this.
Yeah.
It's just not working at this point. And technically, it is free, I guess, if we're reading the manuscript. But
That's
yeah.
true.
yeah,
There's got to be something in there worth the price of admission. I
Yeah.
guess is how I
Right.
think about it.
I need to have a character
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
either like or find interesting, who wants something very badly that I am engaged with, and there's some kind of delay in this character getting it. So I find it hard to start a story with action. There
Or
sometimes
waking up.
waking up.
There's always someone always will start the book with someone waking up from an alarm.
Where am I?
Where am
How
I?
did
What
get
just
here?
happened?
Yeah.
I've been
Don't
asleep
do
the whole
that.
time. Don't
Yes.
do that.
Yeah.
It's really bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
ultimate cliche.
Oh yeah.
What would you recommend an author doing when searching for a literary agent? Do you have any one piece of advice?
You want to go first?
Sure. Well, all right. So the first thing I do is really research who these agents are and what do they want. And there are several places you can do that. There are some big, thick books you can
LMPs,
check
yeah.
out or buy, like the Jeff Herman guide, the
Writer's
Chuck
Digest.
Shambuccino guide. Yeah. You can also there's a website called Query Tracker that I love. That it's like a database online you can use to search what people are looking for. That is super helpful. What would you guys add to that?
I would add layers too. Figure out the personality of the agent. I mean, this is where social media comes in. This is where you look at the books they've sold. You kind of have to quietly stalk their authors and what they're doing in the nicest of
No, you
ways.
should.
And just, one of my authors, Eric Smith, he's now an agent at a different agency, but he's still my author. And he basically followed me on Twitter. He heard me talk about donuts, roller derby, and all kinds of nerd and geek stuff. And his first book was about, it had magical tattoos. And it was a young adult. And he goes, you have tattoos, so I think you might like this. He actually figured out, he pretty much summarized my personality in the query letter in a matter of seconds. So he actually got to know me. We had been talking on Twitter, but he knew what my taste was well before he queried me or looked at my submission guidelines.
I think,
Yeah.
For me, the number one thing that comes to mind is knowing your market. Understand some of the recent books that are like the ones that the one that you're trying to publish. You know, what would a lot of publishing is worked around comparable titles, right? Books are pitched because it's a lot like this other book that was really successful, or it's kind of like this book and a combination of this other one, you know, and knowing some books that are like yours that were successful, so that when you send me your query and you say, well, it's kind of like, you know, Jennifer Egan's A Visit to the Goon Squad, I can say, okay, that's cool, I like that, and you kind of give someone an immediate sense not only of what your book is, but that you've done your homework on what it is you're trying to pitch. And usually when someone has done their research like that, it also means they've gotten things like the word count right. You know, their book isn't twice as long as every other book in that genre. You know, it's written, I don't know, there's just like certain conventions for different types of books, and knowing those as a writer is going to help you find an agent within that genre, because you're not going to get ruled out right away by, well, it's just not right. Like, most agents have, you know, a certain amount of things they're looking for, and to know what those things are and not completely self-defeat by not knowing them right away and submitting without, you know.
Right.
It's good to know what the hoops are when you go in so that you can jump through them.
And if you personalize it and you've been doing your homework, we're much more likely to react. So if I
Right.
get that query where I'm half asleep and I'm answering queries, and I'm like, oh, they actually really, there's a lot of thought that went into this query letter. I don't know right now, but this seems like kind of like an interesting idea. Sure, I'll request it. And I've actually sold books, you know, where they really did their homework before they approached me.
Write your query too, by
Yeah.
the way. Don't just type an email and send it. Like, make that part of the thing you've written, you know.
Right.
Like, figure out how to pitch it. Write a few drafts of your pitch, you know. Have that be something that says, oh, this person can write just from reading the email. It doesn't have to be big and elaborate, but just like, you know, smart and concise and clearly in control of the language. You know, that goes a long way in making me want to actually see what it is you've done.
What I'd be interested in is anything else that you'd like to add. What kind of things are coming up for you? You mentioned Convergence.
Yeah.
That's a
We love Convergence. That's 4th of July weekend. We usually go to that, and usually have a bunch of clients there too. I think next up for me, I just had a client have a book come out like a week ago. Chris Buchholz's book called Freeze Thaw came out from a small press called Apex. It's a super cool book about a quadriplegic guy who is the one man alive who can turn off the satellites that are blocking the sun and save the world
goodness.
from freezing over. It is awesome. It's so fun. And then the one I mentioned to you earlier, though I can't remember on camera, Paul Kruger's book, Last Call at the Nightshade Lounge, which is about a secret society of bartenders that uses magical cocktails to fight monsters. And not only is it a book, it's a recipe book. So you can try to fight monsters on your own after reading it.
that
So-
sounds like fun. What about you, Dawn?
I always encourage people to develop a strong network and community. We live in one of the most literary communities in the country. I feel like we have the top literary community. I'm willing to throw those stakes down on that one. But one of the things that I started with a few other friends, and I think is at the end of, we're going on our 4th year
Wow.
this fall, but it's the Minnesota Publishing Tweet Up, which means Twitter plus Meet Up. That means we get off the internet for 2 hours and we just hang out. That's the precedence. I can't talk today. So if you're a writer or you're in publishing or you just like to read, you come to one of our gatherings and you buy a beer, because it's usually at a bar, and we hang out, and that is what it is. So a lot of people it's a great networking event, but some amazing relationships have come out of that. Some of our authors have, we've met some of our authors through that, actually. Some people have gone on to publication with other places, and it's just a great opportunity to meet people of like mind who appreciate words and books. And I've often said, if you are in Minnesota, there's no excuse not to go to a reading or an event like this and meet people who share the same passion. And we have it in June. So we do it every month, except 3 months out of the year. So it's on Facebook. But it's a great opportunity to meet people who also share this love of books and literacy. And it's a work of love that I've had for, like I said, going on 4 years. So.
And what about you, Eric?
Yeah, so I'm teaching this summer over at the Loft Literary Center. And
Yay.
yeah, no, I'm teaching a course. I'm really excited about it. It's called The First 3 Chapters. And it's going to basically be kind of what we've been talking about, is it's a course on how agents and editors read and what you can do as a writer to not just get tossed away for some stupid reason. Because, basically you want to give your book a shot with your first 3 chapters. And there are simple things you can do in your own self-editing and in your revision, and in just kind of how you conceptualize the best first impression you can make, that's going to give your novel or your story a better chance of not getting put down by a professional reader who's probably got 800 other things they should be reading and are probably a little bit overwhelmed and tired and all these things that kind of make them not necessarily the fairest critic of your work in that moment, but ways you can kind of circumvent that anyway.
Wow.
And I would say too, just to let piggyback on what Eric's saying, is we do request a lot of manuscripts. So I think Amanda had at the agency had 100 manuscripts to read.
Yeah.
Like a month
Oh
ago.
my goodness.
100. I have about 30 right now to read out. Where are you at?
I've got about 30.
Yeah.
I don't even want to know, man.
You don't even want to know. So,
Oh, really?
So
Yeah.
there's, I mean, honestly, when we are reading these requested materials, I mean, we sometimes don't get past chapter 3. So this is valuable. I'm pretty excited to see. Eric's going to like take a run at it because we're going to be at a festival in Fergus Falls at the end of June. We're making the trip up there with the Loft. Is through some amazing legacy funding here in the States, making
Yeah.
it possible. So we'll be talking about this as well up in Fergus Falls, which I'm excited about.
Well,
So,
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, anything else for the good of the order?
Well, I thought we would show you some books. Yeah.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
So this just came out, and this is Laura, who's not here. She's not feeling so good today, but it's called The Only Thing Worse Than Me Is You. And this was actually, this is a work of love. It's actually based on Much Ado About Nothing. It's a spin-off from that. And we're really proud of this because Lily is a librarian, and she's an obsessive Doctor Who fanatic, and she loves Joss Whedon. So if you are a geek by trade, you will appreciate this. But we were really proud of this. Just came out last week, so that's a
wonderful.
yeah. We're really
Lily's
really
hilarious
excited.
on the internet too. So.
Oh, it's gotten great press.
And what else do we have?
This one is my baby author, Tim Hanley. He is my comic book. Actually, he's a PhD in comic book history.
It's the best PhD ever.
Yeah. So
What a PhD to
Yeah.
have. My
so
goodness.
he did a book on Wonder Woman, and this is his newest one, Investigating Lois Lane. And we have a book on Catwoman coming out 2018, which I'm pretty excited about. So this is what we call pop culture history. So you take a topic, and we talked about
Yeah.
making it, accessible for readers, and you just kind of obsessively talk about whatever that topic is. So this just happens to be Lois Lane on this one.
Cool.
This,
What else do we have?
This is a little more serious, and this is one of our few serious books, but it's called Homefront 911, and this is Stacey Bannerman, and this was also a work of love because she's been an advocate on behalf of military families and those with PTSD. So this talks about how the families of the military are also suffering as the soldiers come back from war, and what we need to do to protect the families. And she knows everybody in the federal government, it seems like, because she's constantly advocating on behalf of people, the families who are suffering when someone does have PTSD, because it affects the home, the workplace, you name it. This is a much more emotional, serious book, but it's something I think that should be required reading. So this one was also a work of love for me, and she was one who I felt like I just saw her platform. It was amazing, but also I liked the topic. So she came to the table with, it was very hard to walk away from this. That I knew immediately there was something there. And then of course, Bree, who's not here, she is our illustrator. So she represents a lot of illustrators. So this is one of our new ones, the Stumps of Flat Top Hill. So
Just love the look.
isn't it great? It makes
Yeah.
you think of Edward Gorey. So we have some amazing illustrators. So even in publishing, we don't only do like the book, but we have to deal with illustrated matter and content. And Ken he's very, very talented. He has another book called Hurts Like a Mother that looks like an Edward Gorey spinoff. And so his illustrations are just perfect.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, so we're constantly looking for books that, as you can tell, they're all a little bit different, and that is our agency. We pretty much, we love books that are a little bit offbeat. And then one thing we did at the agency, which is a little bit different, is we were inspired by my friends from Fuse Literary. And so we actually have a small little publishing arm off on the side that we only do, like, I'm only willing to pay for 2 or 3 books a year because it's a lot of work. It's not cheap to make a book if you put a lot of time into it. So we did our first one, which is called The Salt Machine. And this is by Jeff Smeating, actually lives here in the Twin Cities. And this is like book 1 of his series. And this is actually a middle grade novel, so we actually had to do all the work from the cover, which was, I love this cover, but also just, dealing with the production. As agents, we generally don't have to do that, but agencies are now thinking about these things. They're adding publishing arms beyond taking things to traditional publishers. So that's something we take pretty seriously. And then of course we did a ghost story anthology.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, so we always have a little fun with it. And both of them has been lots of fun, but obviously that's a different hat to wear. I depend on the publishers to do that. But also we have found that like if anybody in the agency had something they're passionate about and the publisher's not taking it, then we have another option. We can do it ourselves. And we'll put the same level of professionalism into the process as if the house did it as well. So those are the things that we think about. We look at traditional, we look at if we have to do it ourselves, it's always a hybrid approach. So,
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
When is Alice coming out?
oh, and we're doing a new one. It's going to be called Rabbit Slayer, book 1 of the Alice Chronicles, and that one's going to come out in November. So it'll be a young adult novel. So
Oh,
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
That's the kind of things that we like to do, and so that adds another layer of work internally. But that's you know, I usually make Laura come along for the party on that one, but that's
She's
what
got
we
a
do.
good eye.
Yeah,
Well, that sounds wonderful. I appreciate you all three taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining us at BookBeat. Our guests today have been agents of Red Sofa Literary, Jenny Galaboy, Don Frederick, and Eric Hain. I'm your host, Sue Ellen Zagrabelny, and we'll look for you next time.